Here's an interview by the authors of a new book, Trump Revealed, and I think they're going to give us some factual insights into Donald Trump and some of the things that most people probably don't know or won't admit about Donald Trump.
Next up, the authors of an extensive new book on Donald Trump by the Washington Post. It's called Trump Revealed, an American journey of ambition, ego, money, and power. The introduction credits some 38 Washington Post staffers for the work involved, and the two who wrote it are here with us today. Michael Kranish is an investigative reporter with the paper, and Mark Fisher is the senior editor. Michael, let me start with you. Is it possible to know the essential Donald Trump?
Well, I think a biography helps put into context patterns that you see throughout Donald Trump's life. So we really try to tell, right from his ancestry up to the convention, the story of Donald Trump, how he developed his thought patterns. What's very striking is you see a lot of contradictions in Donald Trump's personality. For example, he changed party registration 7 times. He was a Republican, he was a Democrat. He was a Reform Party candidate, then he was a Republican. He also has changed positions quite a bit. So this week he had said that he doesn't want to pivot, people should see exactly who he is. I think we showed pretty clearly that this is a man who has been a practitioner of the pivot, and the question is that something done for convenience, or is that today the person who he really is?
So, Mark, if we're trying to put a finger on the core Trump beliefs, he's talked about in Art of the Deal, he talks about braggadocio being important and kind of creating an image. What are his core beliefs? Is the pivot the part of the core belief, or what?
Absolutely, he's an improviser. He's someone who jumps out and tries to provoke and tries to connect with people by speaking plainly. And he truly believes that all publicity is good publicity. He also truly believes that where you are on a particular issue doesn't especially matter. What matters is connecting with people and getting what you want, getting the final step. The bottom line is what's important to him. And this has been true throughout his business career and his personal life. It's all about him. It's all about getting to the goal. And he is quite willing to run roughshod over people to get there.
Just getting a win. Just calling it a win.
Getting a win. He grew up in a house where his father warned him against being a nothing. And his whole life has really been structured around proving to himself and others that he is something, and something big and important. And this is only the latest step in really a very consistent pattern throughout his life.
Michael, talk about that ego a little bit, that ego piece. When I talk to people who've had conversations and dealings with him in the campaign context, they always come back to his view about how he's being perceived, how he doesn't want to take advice if it's seen as if the advice is making him do something. He wants to be the author of his own way. Every politician has ego. Where is he on the scale of politicians you've written about in the
Well, he's quite high, no doubt about it. He has his name on buildings. During a lot of his business dealings, he did, as Mark said, run roughshod of a lot of people. And he told us that his ambition when he was doing business deals, because he had a lot of catastrophic failures that we write about, he was looking out for Donald Trump. And if other people suffered as a result, well, he was looking out for the best deal for himself. He told us that if he's president, he'll look out for all sorts of people, everybody. But if you look at his career, he was quite blunt in saying that he was looking out for the best deal for himself.
He truly believes that the system is rigged. This is not just a campaign line of his. This is something he's believed throughout his life.
All systems are rigged.
Yeah, and sometimes rigged against him. But he uses that to justify actions that other people would think of as barely ethical. And so from his very first business deals, from his very first big projects, he's working the system. He's getting tax incentives that no one's gotten before to build a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. He's giving campaign contributions to all sides to get the politicians on his side to get his projects done. So shading the differences and working the system is at the core of what he does.
Is there an origin story, Michael? Is there a place you go back to that says this is really where the essential Donald Trump began?
Well, yes, I think there is. And I think that is when he was working with his father. He was in his early 20s, and his father had made him president of the Trump Management Company, which rented many thousands of units in Brooklyn and Queens. And he decided at one point that he wanted to leave his father's employ and basically go across the bridge to Manhattan. He thought that he didn't like the poverty, the crime, everything he saw over there in Brooklyn and Queens. But as he was leaving, the U.S. government sued him and his father for racial bias. They said that the company was not renting to blacks, that they had lists, and they marked down number 9 for a black person and sent them to other apartments. So Donald Trump had to face a very important question. Was he going to settle with the U.S. government or was he going to fight them? And he was in a nightclub one night and he ran into Roy Cohn, the famous lawyer for Joe McCarthy of Army McCarthy hearings fame. So he got to talking to Roy Cohn, and Roy Cohn said, no, fight like hell, fight the government, and when they hit you, hit back 10 times harder. And so he decided to do that. For 2 years, they fought the federal government. We have these wonderful transcripts of the case where Roy Cohn is arguing on Donald Trump's behalf back in 1973. The bottom line is, over 2 years, they did not convince the government to drop the case. Roy Cohn tried to sue the government in a counterclaim for $100 million. That failed. And they eventually did settle the case. In fact, Donald Trump had to put advertisements in the paper saying, we solicit African-American renters to come to our properties. But it shows you some of the animus that he's had in the federal government. He still, to this day, is very upset that the government sued him for racial bias.
Mark, what kind of a winner is Donald Trump? He's been obviously very successful. He's promising that his personal success is going to translate into presidential success. I talked to Ryan Priebus about how that's working out in the campaign. But is he a winner as he promises to be one constant set of successes, or is he a person who wins and then loses and wins and loses, and on balance things are going great, but it's a bit of a ride in between?
His whole life is a series of very dramatic hills and valleys, and so he's had great successes. He built casinos in Atlantic City. They did well for a while, and then they didn't, and so he went through a series of corporate bankruptcies. And it's interesting, the pattern is that when he succeeds, it's all about Trump, the brand, the name, the image, the aspirational sensibility. But when he fails, it's the system is rigged, it's other people's fault, other people don't get paid. He's stiffed a number of vendors and contractors. There's a long list of people who've spoken to us who are in the book who violated their non-disclosure agreements to tell us about how he treated them when things went sour. And so he is someone who does not take well to losing, and who's someone who, when he wins, it's all about him.
Michael, at the Republican convention, we heard stories from the kids about how he prefers to spend his time, Donald Trump does, with the people working at the sites, not the guy in the corner office. Is there evidence of that in terms of it's his pitch to the electorate? I'm with you, I'm with the regular person.
Yes, well, they try to have this image that he is a self-described billionaire who's a populist and who's blue collar. You know, this is something he was very successful at in the primaries. Really his most successful mark, that he was able to connect with people who really aren't like him. He has tapped into that anger that a lot of working class people have about wages being stagnant. And instead of directing their anger towards people who are super wealthy, which he is, or he says he is certainly, he has been able to channel that anger. And so it is true, he certainly does like to go to the job sites. One thing he certainly loves to do is build. So there's no question that he does like to spend time. Whether he hangs out all night, that's doubtful, but there's no question that he does put on a hard hat and go to the job sites.
All right, Michael Kranish, Mark Fisher, thanks so much. The book is Trump Revealed. Look into his entire life. Thanks to both of you.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And for all of you naysayers that ask that one question or make that statement, Trump's not racist, that's documented proof regarding the discrimination lawsuit that he ended up having to settle, and the Department of Justice had to go back into court a second time because he did not comply with the settlement agreement itself, and they had to go back in court a second time to force him to comply.